In the heart of Accra, a billion-cedi textile empire is on the brink of collapse. Everyone blames the competition until the CEO's own daughter steps forward with a secret so powerful it could save them all or destroy everything her family has built. But before we begin this story, it would help a lot if you could like, comment, subscribe, and share this story with your loved ones. The morning sun broke over Accra with a golden warmth, casting long streaks of light across the city's busy streets. Vendors at Makola Market were already arranging pyramids of ripe mangoes, bolts of patterned Ankara cloth, and baskets of freshly baked bread. Car horns mingled with the calls of trotro mates, their voices echoing above the hum of the waking city. Inside the glass and steel headquarters of Danso Textiles Limited, the atmosphere was far removed from the street's vibrance. The building rose above East Legon like a symbol of power. Polished floors, cool air-conditioned halls, and walls lined with framed photographs of past collections that had once made the company a leader in Ghana's fashion industry. But the air in the boardroom that morning was tense. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Kwame Danso, a man whose presence commanded attention. His dark, close-cropped hair was touched with grey at the temples, his tailored navy suit perfectly pressed. He was known for his sharp mind, firm decisions, and an uncompromising work ethic that had built his empire from a small family weaving shop into one of the most respected textile companies in the country. But this morning, his face was set in a deep frown. The latest reports lay open in front of him, sales charts dipping sharply downward. A foreign competitor had released a striking new fabric design, one that bore an uncanny resemblance to a signature pattern from Danso Textiles. The board members spoke in low, measured tones, discussing legal action and desperate marketing campaigns. The company's annual fashion showcase, once a celebration of innovation and heritage, was now less than a month away, and without a fresh, remarkable collection, their largest investors might pull out. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and Danso stepped into the room. At 24, she carried herself with an effortless elegance, her cocoa-brown skin glowing against the soft cream blouse she wore. To most, Amma was the picture of a privileged young woman, always seen in high-end cafes, her Instagram filled with snapshots from weekend trips and chic outfits. But that image hid a truth no one in the room suspected. She walked forward, a slim folder in her hands, ready to deliver documents her father had requested. As she approached the table, her eyes drifted to the open designs spread before the executives. They were bold, but safe. Nothing that would shock an audience or win back their lost momentum. For a brief moment, her mind flashed with her own secret sketches, the ones she worked on deep into the night, surrounded by fabrics and the quiet hum of her sewing machine. Her heart beat faster. The thought formed quickly, uninvited. She could do it. She could design something that would not only save the showcase, but redefine the company's image. Her hands itched at the idea of blending the old and new. Kente reimagined, batikari woven into evening wear, streetwear infused with adinkra motifs that spoke of Ghana's past while pointing to its future. But she said nothing. The boardroom was no place for that part of herself. Kwame looked up briefly, thanked her, and returned to the grim discussion. As Amma left the room, she could still hear the weight in their voices, the undercurrent of fear running through their words. By the time she stepped back into the bright sunlight outside the building, the fire had already been lit within her. She didn't know how or when, but something told her she would not let Danso Textiles fall, not while she held the key to something greater than they imagined. Later that evening, The dim golden light of Ama's desk lamp washed over her small bedroom, revealing a world that few had ever seen. On the bed, sketchbooks lay open, their pages filled with bold designs that seemed to pulse with life. Rolls of vibrant kente and richly patterned batikari cloth leaned against the wall, alongside neatly folded stacks of Accra in electric blues, fiery reds, red, and deep emerald greens. Each design was a conversation between past and present. Traditional Ghanaian fabrics, reimagined into modern streetwear silhouettes, power suits with adinkra patterns hidden in the lining, flowing gowns edged with gold thread that caught the light like water at sunset. Afua, her best friend, and a rising stylist with a knack for spotting trends, stood at the edge of the bed, her eyes widening with each turn of the page. She traced her fingers over the sharp pencil strokes and fabric swatches, her face shifting from admiration to astonishment. The collection had a rare magic, rooted in heritage, yet daring in its originality. Ama's heart swelled with pride, but beneath it lay a familiar ache. These designs had lived in the shadows for years, concealed from the one person whose approval mattered most. Kwame Danso, her father, and the commanding CEO of Danso Textiles, had never taken her artistry seriously. To him, her late-night sewing sessions were creative hobbies, distractions from the real work of running a business. He had charted her life toward boardrooms, contracts, and spreadsheets, steering her away from the cutting table and sewing machine. Ama knew that if she showed him these designs, his first reaction would be dismissal, just as it had always been. Across town, the atmosphere in the Danso factory was heavy with unease. The rhythmic hum of sewing machines had grown quieter. Workers moved more slowly, their voices hushed as they passed each other on the factory floor. Rumors had begun to spread. Orders had been cut, production schedules were shrinking, and the upcoming fashion showcase might decide the company's fate. Some whispered about layoffs, others stared at the half-finished garments on their tables, wondering if they would still have a job by the month's end. The next morning, the boardroom was bathed in soft sunlight, streaming in through wide glass windows that overlooked the bustle of Accra below. The long mahogany table gleamed, lined with executives in crisp suits. Papers rustled, coffee cups clinked softly against saucers. Ama stepped in, her presence drawing a few curious glances. She stood straighter than usual, her pulse quickening. When the moment came, she presented her proposal to design the collection herself, her tone calm but firm. A beat of silence followed. Then the room erupted in restrained laughter. A few board members exchanged smirks. Others leaned back in their chairs, shaking their heads. The idea seemed absurd to them. The suggestion of a young woman they believed knew nothing of running a high-stakes showcase. At the far end of the table, Kwame's expression hardened. The weight of disapproval in his eyes was sharp, almost cutting. He dismissed her in front of everyone, insisting she leave the matter to those who understood the business. The humiliation burned deep, following her out of the boardroom like a shadow. That evening, she sat alone in the courtyard of the family home, the air thick with the scent of roasted plantain drifting in from the street. The moon climbed higher, its pale light spilling over the carved wooden chairs and stone floor. Then came the slow, deliberate footsteps of Ya Serwa, her grandmother. Ya Serwa's presence carried the quiet authority of someone whose life's work had been woven into the very fabric of Ghana's cultural legacy. Her hands, still bearing faint grooves from decades at the loom in Bonwire, rested gently on Ama's shoulders. Her words, steady and unhurried, spoke of lineage, of duty, of the power of weaving not just cloth, but identity and future. By the time the night deepened and the stars sharpened against the sky, Amma's course was set. She would not wait for permission. Whether the world was ready or not, she would bring her designs to life in secret. She would save the company, and in doing so, prove her worth on her own terms. Amma began her plan in quiet, careful steps. The day after her decision, she moved through the city with a new purpose, eyes scanning streets she had driven past countless times but never truly noticed. In the heart of Osu, tucked between a row of fabric shops and a small chop bar that smelled of grilled tilapia and banku, she found it, a narrow, faded building with cracked paint and dusty windows. It had once been a tailoring shop, long abandoned, its sewing machines left silent under cloth covers. The rent was low, the space modest, but to Amma, it felt like the threshold of freedom. Using a name no one in the industry would recognize, she signed the lease and set to work. She hired a handful of skilled tailors she met quietly at Makola Market, men and women who had been laid off from struggling workshops, each bringing years of experience in working with delicate fabrics and complex cuts. The air inside soon filled with the low, steady hum of sewing machines, the soft snip of scissors, and the rustle of fabric being smoothed across wooden tables. Amma poured herself into the work with relentless energy. Mornings began before dawn, with trips to the markets where boats of Accra and Kente gleamed under the first light of day. The traders knew her only as Adwoa, a young designer with a discerning eye. She picked each piece herself, feeling the weight of the cloth, running her fingers over the tightness of the weave, holding it up to catch the way the light played on its colors. Back in the workshop, the designs took shape. Streetwear hoodies were lined with flashes of royal blue kente. Sharp-shouldered blazers bore hidden Adinkra symbols embroidered on the inside seams. Evening gowns draped in hand-woven batakari stripes shimmered under gold thread that caught every movement. Every stitch carried her signature blend of heritage and innovation. Her grandmother, Ya Sewa, became the quiet heart of the project. Several times a week, she arrived with carefully wrapped bundles of cloth, pieces she had woven herself in the traditional looms of bonwire, each pattern carrying its own meaning. She worked side by side with the tailors, her hands steady, her movements deliberate, infusing each garment with the pride and resilience of generations past. Efua became Amma's shadow, sourcing rare trims, buttons, and accessories from hidden corners of the city, haggling with market women and slipping away before anyone recognized her. They moved like shadows, keeping their work concealed from anyone connected to Danzo textiles. But the secrecy carried its own risks. Kwame had recently hired a celebrated Italian designer, Marco De Luca, as the company's new creative director. Marco was charming and sharp-eyed, with a taste for drama and a habit of watching people a little too closely. One afternoon, at Makola Market, he caught sight of Amma in a plain linen dress, arms full of fabric rolls, her hair tied back simply. She slipped into a trotro before he could approach, but his interest was piqued. He began to ask questions, small ones at first, about local designers working on interesting blends of tradition and modern style. In the workshop, Amma felt the days tightening. The fashion showcase was drawing closer, and each garment needed to be flawless. Nights stretched long into the early hours, the air heavy with the scent of hot irons and fabric starch, the tailor's hands moving with practiced speed. Outside, the streets of Osu quieted, but inside, the small room pulsed with the energy of creation. She knew the risk she was taking. If her father discovered her involvement now, It could end before it began. But each finished piece was a reminder. She was no longer simply hiding a talent. She was building a vision, one stitch at a time, that could change everything. The week of the fashion showcase arrived with a restless pulse in the city. Billboards lit up with teasers for Danso Textile's new collection, while glossy magazines speculated about what the Italian creative director, Marco De Luca, might unveil. Inside Ama's secret workshop, the atmosphere was a mix of exhaustion and pride. The garments were finished, each piece pressed and packed, ready to be revealed to the world. Ama stood in the center of the room, running her hands over the final gown, a flowing silk dress with gold-embroidered adinkra symbols woven subtly into its hem. It was the crown jewel of the collection, a quiet nod to her heritage and her grandmother's craft. The night before the showcase, the workshop fell silent after the last tailor left. Ama locked up and headed home, unaware that across the street, Marco sat in a sleek black SUV, watching her disappear into the distance. He had been piecing together her secret for weeks, those sudden absences, the rare fabrics she seemed to appear with, the subtle confidence in her eyes when fashion was discussed. Under cover of darkness, Marco slipped into the workshop using a duplicate key he had obtained through a careless locksmith. The dim moonlight, filtering through the dusty window panes, revealed the racks of garments, the careful order of tools, and the stack of sketches on a side table. He moved quickly, photographing each design with clinical precision. His camera captured every cut, every fold, every stitch, as though he were cataloging treasures to be stolen. Before leaving, he took a few choice samples, wrapping them in brown paper and sliding them under his arm. The following morning, at the Danso Textiles headquarters, Marco arrived early. He laid out the designs in the boardroom as though they were his own, presenting them to Kwame and the executives with effortless charm. He spoke of inspiration, drawn from immersing himself in Ghanaian culture, and merging heritage with innovation. The board was impressed, nodding approvingly, already envisioning headlines and investor confidence. Kwame's chest swelled with relief. This, he thought, might be the collection to save the company. Meanwhile, Ama walked into the workshop to find chaos. The sketches were gone. The racks looked disturbed, and her tailors stood in uneasy silence. The pit in her stomach deepened as she realized what had happened. Marco had struck, and he was going to claim her work on the biggest stage in the country. The day of the showcase, the Accra International Conference Center buzzed with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of perfume, the flash of cameras, and the low hum of conversations in English, Twi, and Yue. Influencers, investors, journalists, and celebrities filled the rows. Backstage, models stood in their assigned outfits, each garment carrying Ama's fingerprint, though her name was nowhere in the program. Ama moved through the backstage area in a daze, every step fueled by a mix of fear and determination. Then she spotted her grandmother, Ya Serwa, standing calmly in the corner. In her hands was a folded piece of kente cloth, one of the custom weaves she had created for Ama's designs. The weave held a subtle pattern that formed Ama's initials when viewed closely, a detail no outsider could have invented. When Kwame arrived backstage to congratulate Marco on the lineup, Ya Serwa stepped forward, holding up the cloth. The room seemed to still. She unfolded it slowly, revealing the initials hidden in the weave, then gestured toward the garments on the models, each bearing the same hidden signature. The weight of the truth sank in, and all eyes turned to Ama. Kwame's face shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to something quieter, heavier. The realization that the work which might save his company had come from the daughter he had dismissed left him standing frozen in place, caught between pride and guilt. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, and the show was about to begin. Amma's choice was clear. She could walk away in silence or step into the light. She stepped forward. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the vast hall of the Accra International Conference Center. The first notes of rhythmic drumming rolled across the room, blending with the low hum of anticipation. On the runway, a single spotlight flared to life, revealing the first model stepping forward in one of Amma's creations, a tailored jacket in deep emerald kente, lined with gold batikari stripes that glimmered as she walked. The audience's reaction was instant and electric. Heads leaned forward, cameras snapped, murmurs of admiration rippled through the rows. Amma stood just behind the curtain, her breath catching with every step the models took. One after another, they emerged in garments that carried the soul of Ghana, the bold geometry of Adinkra motifs stitched into the cuffs of modern trench coats, the fluid drape of silk gowns edged with the patterns of northern smocks, the streetwear hoodies whose hoods revealed flashes of hand-woven cloth. Each piece moved like a story in motion, carrying with it the work of her hands, the touch of her grandmother, and the resilience of the tailors who had built it with her in secret. In the front row, Kwame Danso watched the show in silence, his eyes fixed not on Marco, who stood stiffly to his right, but on the garments. He began to notice the details Ya Serwa had revealed, the hidden initials in the weave, the craftsmanship that spoke of knowledge only Amma possessed. With every model that passed, his disbelief dissolved, replaced by a dawning respect he had never shown his daughter. By the midpoint of the show, the atmosphere had shifted. The audience was no longer just impressed. They were enchanted. Social media feeds lit up with photos and hashtags. Amma Danso began trending across Ghana before the final piece even stepped onto the runway. The finale came in the form of the gown Amma had guarded most closely, a flowing silk masterpiece, deep indigo fading into gold, with a skirt that caught the light in rippling waves. The gold-embroidered Adinkra symbols at its hem told a story of resilience, unity, and transformation. As the model reached the end of the runway, she paused, turned, and let the fabric billow dramatically, the Adinkra catching the spotlight in a silent declaration of pride. The hall erupted in applause. It was thunderous, unrelenting, the kind of ovation that no brand could buy. Investors rose to their feet. Journalists rushed to capture every detail, and in that moment, Amma stepped from backstage onto the runway. Her presence silenced the clapping for a heartbeat before it doubled in force. She walked calmly, her chin high, the truth of her authorship now undeniable. Marco tried to slip away into the wings, but the whispers followed him. The applause was not his. When Amma reached the front of the runway, she turned toward her father in the front row. Their eyes met, his holding the weight of pride, regret, and an unspoken apology. Slowly, he rose to his feet and began to clap, the sound of his hands merging with the roar of the crowd. By the end of the night, investors were lining up to speak to her, praising her vision, and offering partnerships that stretched beyond Ghana's borders. Kwame made a public announcement that stunned everyone. Amma would be taking over as creative director of Danso Textiles, with full authority over the company's design direction. The story spread across newspapers, blogs, and TV stations, the hidden talent who saved a legacy brand. But for Amma, the moment was about more than recognition. It was a victory for every dreamer whose gift had been doubted, for every young Ghanaian who believed that tradition and innovation could stand side by side. As the crowd slowly thinned and the stage lights dimmed, Ya Serwa approached, her eyes shining with quiet pride. Amma took her grandmother's hand, feeling the rough texture of skin shaped by years at the loom. She knew this was just the beginning, not just of her career, but of a new chapter for Ghanaian fashion on the world stage. And somewhere, deep inside, she made a silent vow. Her work would never again stay hidden in the shadows. From the shadows to the spotlight, Amadanso proved that hidden talents can change destinies. But in a world where success attracts envy, her biggest challenge may be the battles yet to come. If you love this journey, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe, because the next story will take you even deeper into Ghana's most unforgettable dramas.